Hello and welcome to Level Your Playing Field. My name is Ginger Ferrer for anybody who's watching for the first time. I've been a community advocate for approximately 25 years and an on-air producer advocate for almost 14 years. I try to address concerns that remain unanswered, unremedied, and seemingly ignored by the power structure that's supposed to apply the constitutional processes to these perceived violations and concerns. In prior segments over the years, I have used video, music, or clips to make a point or help validate a point of concern or perception of the subject matter being presented at the time and voiced by other than myself. Pink Floyd's The Wall is such a video. It spoke then and continues to speak now about the education systems of countries and the abuses it imposes not only on students, but on some teachers as well. Humiliating children in front of their peer group, denigrating a child in front of anyone they're in front of. Respect for a child appears to have no concern for the mental health of the child or the world of continued abuses he and she will undergo from other children and or adults contribute to their humiliations. Using children's education concerns to further immobilize their education for other than education matters seems to be a pattern used over and over again for many decades. Not only in this country as the video depicts, but all over the world. For years I have spoken and recognized the fact that the reason for these practices is that those who enslave or otherwise utilize these barriers of violations appear to realize they have to keep the status quo at a much lower level of attainability in order to keep in place those who appear to be chosen for other than ethical or constitutional practices. Surely it is safe to assume they realize among the enslaved that if given the opportunity to receive an education, they would attain said education, as was proven in this very country when emancipated slaves went on to become businessmen and women, educators, teachers, advocates, criminals, just like anybody else. The perception that I've gotten over the years is that there are people on this planet, in America and overseas, that really believe that they were put here for the very distinct reason of subjugating other human beings for their personal gains, and that they have a very right to do that. In this country and other countries that have some kind of a democratic process, this is the contradiction, but yet it was allowed to happen. And even after the very many constitutional rights that came up as a consequence of eradicating that mindset and those processes, is still ongoing. It's just very well hidden at times. In other words, and other times it's as blatant as it can be. Being white, black, red, or any other color in between is not the measuring stick of qualification. It is the denied ability to acknowledge and allow all peoples from all over this planet to achieve and or receive even a basic education. The need for cheap or low slave labor is of paramount importance in their perceived viewpoint of how they manage or mismanage the rights of those they will violate in every and any manner necessary and willing to pay the price from among the body of men and women who, for the sake of greed and personal prejudices, will get on the gravy train of unconstitutionality on a grand scale. The teachers at Atlanta were not the only ones who contributed to that debacle. The higher-ups who orchestrated it and put it into motion were at the helm of these violations, yet very, very little has been revealed regarding who these perpetrators were and are. These same like-minded individuals dwell right here in Manchester, Concord, and other locations in the state of New Hampshire and across this country and the world at large. It is a movement designed and orchestrated at the higher levels of title and position, both political, financial, and educational. In the past, I have mentioned a classic movie called The Time Machine, written by H.G. Wells. The original movie, not the follow-up one made years later. It depicts, at the turn of the 19th century, a scientist who designs a time machine. In it, he travels through humankind's history. He returns and he shares his travels with his cronies. They do not appear to know how to accept his version of events. And I want to see if I brought it with me. The plot, it's called The Time Machine. It was a 1960 film. And the plot is that in January 5th of 1900, four friends arrived for dinner at the house of H. George Wells, who staggers in to describe his strange experience. So in the movie, the actor Rod Taylor actually plays the role of the author of The Time Machine. During an earlier dinner on December 31st, 1899, Wells describes the fourth dimension to David Philby. He had shown them in an earlier meeting a small prototype machine which had claimed he traveled in time and which disappeared when the miniature lever on it was pressed. He goes on to stipulate that he met humanoids of the future. I mean, thousands and thousands of years into the future. And he discovers a Sphinx building, and locked inside are Morlocks, who are a almost like caveman type of humanoid who was once not as they appear, and there was people on the outside called Eloys, and they were programmed almost like in a catatonic state to respond to the sound of a siren that came out of that cave, and they used them for slave labor and for cannibalization. They were cannibals. And I have to say something before I forget, because I always forget to state this, and it's not an excuse. I have stuttered since I was a very small child, and I have tried to overcome that. But there's something about when I try to pronounce certain words that it almost feels like my tongue curls up within itself, and the pronunciation struggles to get out. So my apologies for stuttering, or for mispronouncing or correcting myself while on air, but it's just something that I've had all my life. He goes back and forth through time. Once he has found the Eloys and the Morlocks, he goes back to his own time to share his information with his friends, who are very leery about what he is sharing with them. So on the next to the last trip, the Eloys are trapped inside of the cave by the Morlocks, and so he finds a way to get in through a passageway, and he finds these rings that record the history of humankind, as opposed to books, and he starts to learn more and more about how all of this came into being, that there was only the Morlocks and the Eloys left of humanity, and so. They fight the fight, and they overcome the Eloys, and he travels back in time one more time, and he picks up 3 books, and he goes back to the time that he left to begin the process of helping to resurrect humankind with positive information. And I would assume that one of those books was a Bible, the other was a science book, because in the telling of the story, it does not divulge what books he took, But being a scientist, it's safe to assume that he did pick up, besides the Bible, or religious material, that he did at least pick up one of the three books as a science book. And so again, humanity begins one more time in another time frame to try to get it right. And it just seems to appear that no matter how positive the law is, how fair the law is, there are people that have, through the generations, just refused to adapt to it, to use it as it was meant to be used, and to violate it altogether. Between the secret societies and the cronyism network that covers the whole planet, humankind, in some way or form, has been held hostage. Millions of people have died, and many millions more have had their rights violated, especially on American soil. The book was written during the Victorian England time frame, so the people that were depicted as the survivors of humankind, they're only Caucasian with blonde hair and blue eyes. The Morlocks have a caveman kind of definition. They have long, stringy white hair, and their skin isn't black, but it's darkened, and they have a muscular but very short humanoid structure. And their eyes cannot take the light, so their eyes appear to be yellow. Sadly, within one's own tribe and familial affiliations are those who practice and believe that they and only they are entitled to use and abuse any human being they target inside and outside of their own human tribe affiliation or familial membership. The greed, need, and sense of entitlement that has permeated this world for eons continues. If one sunders the education rights of students, then there comes the next generation of low wages, crime, unconstitutionality, imposed crimes against humanities in all of its tribal forms and identifications. As we the people have seen from all over the world, these mindsets are not exclusive to any one tribe or gender. Being born into a family that allows abuses and disrespect of their family's children and adults to the mistreatment at schools, churches, and society as a whole. Rage takes over, and sometimes the outcome is striking back at those who have committed these illegal and unconstitutional acts against them, men and women who wear honorable titles and act as dishonorably and illegally as possible and get away with it. One must continue to bite the bullet and not give in to wanting to strike in a manner considered illegal, although could be viewed as self-defense. Now, the reason that I'm replaying Pink Floyd's The Wall is because my work is now on YouTube, and I'm hoping that this message reach out beyond the city of Manchester and the state of New Hampshire to other fellow human beings who are trapped in these circumstances. They have a right to defend themselves, to there's a word, to unshackle their shackled lives. I know and I believe with all my heart and soul that God knows what's going on with every single human being on this planet. And that if a man or a woman or a child or a kid fights back, they're not being disobedient. They are acting in self-defense. And the fact that religion has been used as a weapon instead of as a tool for so many centuries has contributed to that mindset and to the victimizations of millions and millions of human lives across the planet. So I have one more thing before the clip. There's two things in this video that I didn't recognize until I rewatched it again at home. One is that the teacher that's so abusive in this clip has a very cold home life with a parent or a wife. I don't know who the woman is, but she looks mature in age, but so does he, so it could be his wife or his mother. And she makes him eat something that he doesn't want to eat that's on the plate, and he set it aside. And so he goes to school as a teacher, and he abuses the hell out of his students. Maybe out of frustration, maybe out of rage, I don't know. But it would appear that these mistreatments beget more mistreatments, whether it's a child at school, whether it's a coworker, whether it's a spouse, other family members. When a person's life is so inundated with negativity and they're suffocated by the lack of not being able to express themselves, it can cause the very thing that permeates their lives, they turn around and begin to do it to somebody else. And so the next generation begins to receive or be the recipient of the current generation's abuses because the prior generation has abused them. So, John, whenever you're ready.
Scribblings? A secret code? No. Poems, no less. Poems, everybody! The laddie reckons himself a poet. Money, get back. I'm all right, Jack. Keep your hands off my stack. New car, caviar, four-star daydream. Think I'll buy me a football team. Absolute rubbish, laddies. Get on with your work. Repeat after me. An acre is the area of a rectangle whose length is 1 furlong and whose width is 1 cubit.
At the very end of that clip, the phone is ringing, and there's a picture of a young man and a woman. And I would assume that it's the boy grown up, and he may very well have or contributed somehow to the writing of Pink Floyd's The Wall. It would appear that most adults, teachers, principals, whatever, either don't have enough psychological training to understand the complexities of a child's mind that's developing. It is not a fully mature brain that comes to school for a 5, 6, or 7-year-old kid. And if he or she has certain limitations or just abject shyness or fear, because this is a whole new different set of circumstances in their lives that they're not quite ready for. There doesn't seem to be enough understanding for a child at the beginning stages of his or her education to carry them through without damaging them in the long term, because the mind remembers everything. And it may not come up for a long time. But then in retrospect, as something triggers a memory, all of that comes flooding back. And the contradictions that have been such a major part of all of those experiences that shouldn't have happened in the first place are puzzling, because there was nobody there to protect a child in his or her developmental stages. I'm always looking for positive spiritual information that other human tribes or other human beings across the planet practice, and it's not complicated. It's so incredibly basic and simple that I thought I would share a couple, because I ordered 2 posters from artposters.com, because I need to see it around me to remind me, because I am so full of confusion and anger and frustration that the rule of law just does not seem to apply long enough or well enough in this community and in the world at large to help those people that need its protection. So this is from the Dalai Lama, from A to Z. It says, live one day at a time and make it a masterpiece, Dalai Lama. A, avoid negative sources, people, places, and habits. B, believe in yourself. C, consider things from every angle. D, don't give up and don't give in. E, everything you're looking for lies behind the mask that you wear. F, family and friends are hidden treasures. Seek them and enjoy the riches. That is, if your family and friends are of a positive nature. G, give more than you planned to. H, hang on to your dreams. I, if opportunity doesn't knock, build a door. J, judge your successes by what you had to give up in order to get it. K, keep trying no matter how hard it seems. L, love yourself. M, make it happen. N, never lie, cheat, or steal. O, open your arms to change but don't let go of your values. P, practice makes perfect. Q, quality, not quantity, in everything you do. R, remember that silence sometimes is the best answer. S, stop procrastinating. T, take control of your own destiny. U, understand yourself in order to better understand others. V, visualize it. W, when you lose it, don't lose the lesson. X, excellence in all things. Y, you are unique. Nothing can replace you. Z. Zero in on your targets and go for it. Now, the Native Americans, 10 Commandments. Remain close to the Great Spirit. Show great respect for your fellow beings. Give assistance and kindness wherever needed. Be truthful and honest at all times. Do what you know to be right. Look after the well-being of mind and body. Treat the earth and all that dwell thereon with respect. Take full responsibility for your actions. Dedicate a share of your efforts to the greater good. Work together for the benefit of all mankind. Now, these are beliefs that are practiced by other human tribes, at least these two, and there are many more. The Buddha and Allah and Kuan Yin and Bodhisattva and Paramahansa Yogananda, when he was alive, he had a place in California where they practice a humanitarian type of religious thinking and practices. I've mentioned this many times so that people try to understand me, and if they don't, well, that's, I can't please everybody. But it took me a long time to get over my fear of God, because I had been brainwashed since the first day I stepped into a Catholic school to believe that I was going to go to hell if I was not a perfect little kid. I lived in fear for years until I started liberating myself by reading a lot of materials from a lot of different countries that were translated into English, and seeing how simple it is to believe in God, because I came to realize that God knows me because he created me, and he knows what I'm thinking, why I'm thinking it. And if I'm off on the wrong foot, he knows why. And when I correct myself, he also knows that as well. So I communicate constantly without having to step into a particular building to do so. And I have no guilt about not doing that, because it doesn't feel real to me, in the sense that so much fear was attributed to it when I was a kid, that I feel like I'm disrespecting God if I go into a building to pray to God, and I feel that it's an obligation as opposed to wanting to do it voluntarily. And because God created this whole universe, I believe that no matter where I stop to think and thought to God, that is just as much a church or a steeple or a chapel or a synagogue or a mosque as any other building, because I'm communicating directly. So again, when rage takes over, and sometimes the outcome is striking back at those who have committed these illegal and unconstitutional acts against them, men and women who are supposed to act honorably and do not, and continue to get away with it, is one of the most frustrating, almost insurmountable barriers that humankind has all over this planet. But here, again, I repeat myself, since you're a little kid, you're taught that if you're good, you have to be good. You have to be good. Otherwise, there are penalties to pay. But some of the most honorably titled human beings in our constitutional country act so dishonorably and so disrespectfully and so unconstitutionally that the puzzle or the answer has yet to be answered, or the questions, I should say, need to be answered as to why they have succeeded for so long to abuse the rights of American citizenry and the constitutional practices that are expected to enforce those violations, but are not. They say that the truth will set you free, but not in politics, the law, or business. It just does not hold water long enough to float the truth. So it would appear as in times past and currently, because of freedom of speech, they can fold, spindle, and mutilate the much-needed truth of a circumstance or circumstances to keep their perceived quid pro quo ongoing and going on. History continues to repeat itself. The only difference is that before the internet came into our world and electronic uses were and are available to the world as a whole, the perpetrators of these long-lived and executed frauds, violations, murders, and worse have been able to get away with it, appearing to have the help of those with the power to disseminate the news on radio, television, books, and articles in magazines in times past. Although it still continues to this very second, it is not so easy to control as in past history of our country and the world at large. And yet it would or could appear to still apply today, when one could easily conjecture that some news sources are so connected to the violators of many unconstitutional goings-on, they downplay deliberately or misreport or do not report the full and much needed people's right to know information about what is going on right under our noses in this and many other American communities. Their alliances appear to be across the board in our country and across the planet. Otherwise, how could immigrants and refugees be put into one's community sanctioned by alleged constitutional processes and get away with the rankest kind of mistreatment regarding housing, wages, and the very air they unknowingly are breathing, filled with dangerous air pollutants and other dangerous elements as lead paint and insect infestations that existed before they were brought here in the first place. Future desperate immigrants and refugees desperate to work, who may or may not be treated humanely or constitutionally. Monies designed or designated to fund these programs, at the very least, mishandled and or sometimes taken out of one program and put into another for the sake of what or for whom? Who are the beneficiaries of these long perceived wrongdoings, and why and how are they allowed to get away with it? I have another video. It is Ian Anderson's Jethro Tull locomotive breath. And it's the very last item on the disc. It's called Wind Up, and it asks the questions. It asks and tells the question about, I don't believe you. You got the whole thing. You got the whole damn thing all wrong, because again, another recipient, another human being, who grew up to then appeared to reflect upon what he was taught, came to realize that what he was taught was not what he felt was correct in the sense of worshiping his creator. Anywhere and everywhere that he may have wanted to, as opposed to having to go to church one day a week to talk to God. So here is Jethro Tull's Wind Up. John?
When I was young and they packed me off to school and they taught me how not to play the game, I didn't mind if they groomed me for success, or if they said that I was just a fool. So I left there in the morning with that God tucked underneath my arm, the half-assed smiles and the book of rules. And I asked this God a question, and by way of reply, He said, I'm not the kind you have to wind up on Sundays. So to my old headmaster and to anyone who cares, before I'm through, I'd like to say my prayers. I don't believe you. You had the whole damn thing all wrong. He's not the kind you have to wind up on Sundays. Well, you can excommunicate me on my way to Sunday school and have all the bishops harmonize these lines. How'd you dare to tell me that I'm a father's son when that was just an accident of birth? I'd rather look around me, compose a better song, 'cause that's the honest measure of my worth. In your pomp and all your glory, you're a poorer man than me, as you lick the boots of death born out of fear. Oh, when I was young, and they packed me off to school and taught me how not to play the game. I didn't mind if they groomed me for success, or if they said that I was just a fool. I left there in the morning with that God under my arm, the half-assed smile and the book of rules. Well, you can excommunicate me on my way to Sunday school. Have all the bishops harmonize these lines. When I was young, and they packed me off to school, and they taught me how not to play the game. I didn't mind if they groomed me for success, or if they said that I was just a fool. So to my old headmaster and to anyone who cares, before I'm through, I'd like to say my prayers. Well, you can excommunicate me on my way to Sunday school, have all the bishops harmonize these lines. I don't believe you. You had the whole damn thing all wrong. He's not the kind you have to wind up on Sunday.
Thanks, John. There's a note here that I downloaded from YouTube, and it says, this was published on July 13th, 2012. Wind Up is the final track on Jethro Tull's 1971 album Aqualung. The all-music guide to rock specifically refers to Wind Up and its examination of religion and God as separate entities when it notes that the album probably gets lots of teenagers wrestling with these ideas for the first time in their lives. And because I believe that nothing is accidental, these musicians came to this planet, and they have given the world a lot of food for thought in their wording and in their music. And in the 70s, it was a time of rediscovery. The Beatles especially, contributed quite a bit, including John Lennon's Imagine. Now, I tried to get a copy of that to play for you because of the words that are the words of the song of Imagine a World Without War, a world where children don't suffer, and many other of the lyrics of that song. And they separate religion from God because God is God. And the way that some people interpret religion is not what God is. And so I just can't, I cannot condone or accept that all of these men and women that run our country, our cities, our towns, even our family, could be so wrong. And then we're supposed to punish ourselves for not believing what they believe, when it is so wrong, when it's such a contradiction, when it's such a rabid contradiction. The mistreatment regarding housing, wages, the very air that they breathe. I have a question. Money is designated to fund these programs that many people advocate, including myself, on air and in the community. At the very least, mishandled or sometimes taken out of one program and put into another for the sake of what? And for whom? Who are the beneficiaries of all of these perceived wrongdoings, and why and how are they allowed to get away with it? And what is even of greater concern, why doesn't our government track these monies to see if they are being used as originally designated in the original request for assistance? How can any government at city, state, and or federal level arbitrarily take money out of one fund to fund another not reported to the agency who provided the funding and not be held accountable? Isn't this fraud? Isn't this blatant fraud? Misrepresentation of a need that was then provided and then redirected to an undisclosed need. Robbing from Peter to pay Paul fraudulently and not being held accountable. Taxpayer dollars appearing to be allowed to be misappropriated with the blessings of the blind-eyed federal government process or lack thereof. When a grant is issued to a city agency, where does the money come from, and from what specific entity? Is there a follow-up to track these monies and how it is spent? Where is the responsibility factor in all of this, and who are those responsible for allowing these matters to take place, and why is it kept secret in the first place? Don't ask, don't tell appears to be the only factor being exercised in these concerns. The mayor is only an entity entitled to do what is constitutionally right for all of the people all of the time. But it would appear that with the help of his perceived posse of helpers, he has been getting away with less than ethically processed needed procedures for peoples of this community's need, but rarely, if ever, receive it. He is a businessman wearing a mayor's title, not a mayor wearing a mayor's title. His seeming lack of conscience or respect for the rule of law has served him well over these past years, but it is time to bring that to a screeching halt. Not that this will guarantee that the next mayor will act as expected according to city charters and the rules of law, local, state, and federal. As history continues to prove right here in our little corrupted City Hall community, too many cronies, too little law enforcement to put a stop to it, or at the very least slow it down a lot. So just to clarify for Mr. Mayor and his groupies, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but not all of the people all of the time. Ignorance is not bliss. It is their perceived means to our end. I was at a poster website recently and I found those spiritual references I mentioned before. The reason I included John Lennon's Imagine, Pink Floyd's The Wall, and Ian Anderson's Jethro Tull's Wind Up from Locomotive Breath is to demonstrate how long the generations of humankind have had to hurdle and overcome or duplicate the same abuses passed on generation by generation all over the planet to family and fellow beings in all manner of social interactions. Teachers and education administrators abusing the rights of children, openly criticizing them in front of their peer groups, striking them with instruments of pain, denigrating them in such a negative manner as to cause them shame and humiliation that bears negative fruit in their lives. Where did these mindsets come from? Why have they been allowed to abuse the children of other parents and get away with it? How have they been able to get away with the physical abuses as well as in hitting with wooden rulers, paddles, and open hands? In the workplace, racism and sexism, disrespect and violation, seemingly sanctioned repeatedly over the decades and generations of humankind. As I mentioned earlier, at the end of Pink Floyd's video, one sees the phone ringing and a photograph of what can one assume is a picture of the grown child who was depicted in the video as a younger student, and he is sharing his experiences through this piece of music to demonstrate and speak to the hell some children the world over must be exposed to each and every day. John Lennon's Imagine speaks to the ongoing and yet unachieved quest for peace and harmony across the board and across the world for humankind still waiting. Ian Anderson's Wind-Up speaks to yet another perception by a once violated child's viewpoint of the massive contradictions of religious teachings. He is not the kind you have to wind up on Sunday. So while some of us try to make sense of what does not make sense, the world and our own communities continue to contradict or otherwise continue to violate the rule of law and the constitutional rights of many of its citizens, and the procedures completely ignored for generations. Where are our protectors, and why and what is the perceived agenda of those who have been allowed to continuously get away with it? Who are the unseen and unknown entities who appear to be holding hostage our constitutional rights en masse? Last week I spoke about indoor air pollution items that I was trying to get information from, and one entity declined the invitation. But I have a website for you. It's www.nextag.com, nextag.com, and it is all lowercase, and it addresses carbon monoxide monitor products, and there you can find local and out-of-state sources that manufacture handheld items that can monitor all kinds of indoor air pollutants, from carbon monoxide to what is the other one? I can't think of it right this minute. But most of it is carbon monoxide and toxic air, indoor toxic air. And there is another company, it's called the Leader in Indoor Air Quality Measurements. And it's called T as in Tom, S as in Sam, I. And they make Be proactive in assessing indoor air quality. Certified accuracy with reliable results. So if you go to that website, they give you a litany of the different kinds of air pollutants, such as aerosols and gases, fine particulates in the air, indoor air pollution, micromonitors, particle counters, dust tracks, in the United States, you can go to www.tsandthomas.com. And that's all lowercase, www.tthomassmi.com. They have a toll-free number, 1-800-874-2811. 1-800-874-2811. There are handheld devices that one can use for their personal use to track the air where they work, to track the air wherever they go, to a hotel, a motel, an event. For way too long, these concerns have been ignored. Now, the American Disabilities Association, there is a website, www.ada.gov, and they talk about standards for accessible design. And that means that anybody in a wheelchair has to be able to access a building, according to ADA specifications. And since the City of Manchester has not seen fit to put a disability, an access disability door at the entrance of this part of the building at 1045 Elm Street, I'm going to be in touch with these people, and also the management company that's an anagnost managing company that has also dropped the ball. Because if they hadn't fixed the inside of this building to be wheelchair accessible, I might not have a leg to stand on. But they did it on the inside, but they refused, they absolutely appeared to refuse to put a handicap access door in front of this building. And it is a very hard, heavy door. And like I've repeated 100 times, it's a very narrow accessibility because of a post that stands just before the door to the extreme left-hand side of the entrance of that very narrow open doorway, or to be open doorway. So I'm going to follow this up to find out what one has to do to get the City of Manchester to supply the door that's needed. Now, I have maybe a minute and a half. In 2012, there was a 225th birthday of the U.S. Constitution, and I won't have time to read this today because I have to get off the air. But there's a lot of information here about the constitutional rights of citizens and how they can address it in their communities and at their state capitals. Freedom isn't free, ladies and gentlemen. It just isn't. And if we don't fight for it, they're going to continue to eliminate it until there's nothing left. So please, please remember that freedom isn't free. And so long until next time.